Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
And we're back with Access to Democracy, and a gentleman who, if he has not been our most frequent guest over these last 12 or so years, certainly is right up there with them in several capacities. But once again, Senator Jim Carlson from the now 51st Senate District.
From Area 51.
Welcome back. And what we called this was the legislative year that was. And it really was a most interesting and probably one of the most exciting sessions that we have ever had. The legislature, and I'm going to ask you to talk about some of what you think are the highlights, undid some of the woeful wrongs of the last 8 years. And I know that you were very involved in it. So,
actually, Alan, I would actually say that it was the last 13 years that we undid a lot of things.
Okay.
Because for the very first time in 13 years, we have a budget that does not require gimmicks and tricks and shifts. We are sitting here today in June not having to go back next year in 2014 and fix something that will cause us to increase taxes or to borrow more money or to cut something. This is the very first time that has happened in 13 years.
And it's because the legislature, and of course what happened with the legislature is both houses were voted Democratic with Governor Dayton, who I think is really a courageous and a terrific governor, and said we're going to undo some of the fiscal mismanagement of this state, and did it.
He did it.
And
yes.
did it, where we're not borrowing from the schools to pay for the general fund. We're giving back to the schools money that should have been theirs years ago, among other things.
It's actually right. What generally we've been saying is that you can't build for tomorrow when you're stuck paying for the past. And that's what we did, is we changed that that situation where we always had to look around for more money. And that wasn't just a partisan issue, because what happened in 2011 is the Republican majority had the same problem, where they had to look around for more money. They had certain obligations that they had to meet. They tended to cut some things that, they cut $240 million out of higher ed, which was a big problem. And what we did is we restored that. But again, back to the looking around for more money, their solution was to borrow from schools and to actually go out and pawn that tobacco settlement, to use tobacco settlement money and in effect convert it for present operations. So that was something that was actually something that when I was in my first term, we refused to let the governor do, because he wanted to do it then too. So that era is over.
So last year's election, in addition to re-electing you, re-electing a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House with a Democratic governor, also stopped two inappropriate constitutional amendments from being passed. And interestingly, as we sit here today, the United States Supreme Court just yesterday did away with DOMA.
That's right. Mm-hmm. And
in effect endorsed gay marriage, which was passed in your session this
that's
year.
right. We passed it. And when you talk about noteworthy things, that was easily the most emotional and historic vote that I've ever taken. When we actually had the vote that day, and really, we didn't focus on it because it didn't have to go through very many committees, and it went fairly rapidly on the floor. So there wasn't a lot of time spent on it because we already had counted the votes. We knew it was largely it was going to pass. And then that day when it was passing, I decided that I wanted to be the vote that made it pass. So there are 67 senators. 34 votes means that you've got a majority. So when the board hit 33 votes, that's when I pushed my yes button. So I am the 34th
Oh, is that right?
vote. Yes.
So you were the...
Very proud of that, yes. And that is something that I think I've been talking about for quite some time, is that our friends, their situations are no different than my wife of 43 years and I. They love each other. There are gay people here. God made them. They're not going to change. So why not give them the advantages that the rest of us have?
Well, the one Supreme Court case from New York really pointed up the fact that here is a couple that had been together for 42 years. One partner died, and the other partner was saddled by IRS with a $363,000 estate tax that she wouldn't have had to pay had they been a man and a woman. And that manifestly is so unfair. And actually the Supreme Court really 5-4, but nonetheless saw it and is now the law of the land.
That's right, and that's one of the things that is misunderstood. Some people will respond to your comment by saying, oh yes, you can do that with wills, you can do that by law, you can do that by agreements. Well, you can't do that one, because a heterosexual spouse automatically gets an estate without paying estate tax, without going through probate, whereas any other couple, it does have to go through probate.
And with a gay couple, if one is in the hospital, a lot of times the partner was denied access when they call for somebody to be with them in the last hours. And there are, a myriad of cases where that happened. These things are senseless and unfair, and maybe that's behind us, that we still have so much to do.
Right. There still are some states that have to change some of the laws that prevent those types of interactions. Yes. Minnesota is, of course, now not one of them. Plus, federal benefits will supersede state benefits in most states. One of the groups that was behind a lot of this that people don't realize is the military, because military people were retiring in all 50 states and abroad, and they would be discriminated against if they were getting military benefits, and it depended on which state they lived in. So the military wanted to have one rule fits all, and so what they were lobbying for was to make sure that it was equal across the states. So federal...
Also 200 corporations, and I heard yesterday the reason for that is because they had to have two sets of books, one paying salary and the other involving benefits. So there were 200 corporations that filed amicus curiae briefs with the Supreme Court, Target among them.
Is that right? Yeah.
And GE and some of the other really multinational corporations, because it just made no sense.
That's right. And in Minnesota, we have, I think, if I remember the number right, it's 243 major corporations in Minnesota that do provide domestic partner benefits that made it available to couples of any type. And so, again, Target and 3M, all of the larger ones were among them. But in the cases of when they tried to bring in executives that may come from a state where they have been married, they would come into Minnesota and no longer be married. So there were corporations that were lobbying on that basis, that it was restricting recruitment. And they didn't want that kind of restriction. Now, this isn't just young people. This is sometimes older executives also.
And the bottom line is, it was a denial of equal protection, it was manifestly unfair, and it was senseless. Not
right.
unlike what we're seeing with some of the states that are now proposing new abortion restrictions that are clearly unconstitutional before they're even passed. Not unlike the United States House of Representatives, which 37 times with the Republican majority has voted to do away with Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. Senseless, meaningless, they're not getting anything else done, and then they wonder why they have a 10% or less approval rate with the voting populace. It really is incredible.
In truth, that one is actually, I list that under entertainment, because for them to pass a repeal of Obamacare 37 times, and yet the public, if you would ask the public if they want to have undeniable insurance, they want to have no caps, they want to have restriction on the being able to cancel insurance, all those good things that came with Obamacare, they're absolutely for it. And then the House of Representatives is trying to twist it into something that they say is, I'm not exactly sure what their negatives are.
Let them keep doing it, because I hope it comes back to haunt them in 2014. I have a letter in the local paper today about health care, as a matter of fact.
Oh.
That, I rarely write a letter to the papers, but I was so incensed by somebody's comment last week that I was moved to write a letter.
Oh, good, because I remember that comment. And that person is on Medicare. That person is of the age where they're on what we would normally call single-payer universal health care.
Getting
Medicare.
Federal benefits, but
That's right.
But not for anybody else. Getting back to the state, one of the things that enabled all this to happen was the fact that we changed the income tax structure, and that the people who are earning the most now have to pay a little bit more. Now, last year we heard, if we do this, they're all going to flee the state. And one of the things I said in my letter today, in another vein, is I haven't seen anybody flee the state, because the people who have earned it are not really being hit or hurt by the amount of the tax increase. And it just changed the whole financial structure of this state around. It turned it on its head. It enabled us to do things that we should have been doing over the last dozen years.
That's right. Something, it could be called pent-up demand, because what we've done, and if you remember, the tax rates were lowered around the time of, actually they started out with Governor Arnie Carlson and Jesse Ventura. They were going down. Governor Arnie Carlson prevented 1 year of a lowered tax rate. He said it would be irresponsible to lower it that low. The next year, when Jesse Ventura came in, it hit the bottom of the top rate. The top rate was 7.85%, and that was, no matter how much you made above that threshold, you still paid no more than 7.85% on taxable income. And Governor Dayton said that that's hurting our future, which I tended to agree with him. And we had that for many years, and that's what got us into these problems of having to borrow from schools and really living on a shirt tail and taking away, especially from our education system. That's a recipe for disaster in the future.
And it was education system starting at the very bottom.
Yes.
Starting with preschool, starting with kindergarten, starting with K through 12, and very heavily hit in higher education.
That's right, yes.
And each of those suffered, and as a result, our standings in the nation have suffered.
Yes.
And we have gone down percentage-wise as a result of that.
And everything is related. We've had a fairly high level of post-secondary involvement. So higher ed has been very important for Minnesota. And if you listen to the statistics now, Minnesota is right at the top of student debt in the nation, which is that's a big problem for us in the future. So student debt is a big issue for the parents and students in Minnesota.
I hope that Congressman Klein is watching, who's ready to double the amount of interest rates for these student loans, which would be absolutely absurd, or to turn them over to the private marketplace where they can go as high as 8.35% instead of the 3% plus that they're paying now. Absolutely senseless if we want these people to step into the workplace and be able to work and have a free mind to do what they are being trained to do.
And how different is that from the days of about 40 years ago when certain career paths would give you a forgiveness of your student costs. Teaching at one time, there would be a forgiveness each year that you stayed in teaching. The GI Bill, we had a lot of GIs take advantage of coming back from their service to be able to get higher education. Now, that cost the country nothing, absolutely nothing, because what we had was a rise in the prosperity of all of those people who took advantage of those kinds of opportunities to get higher education. And now we're not only charging them a lot, but we're charging them a lot of interest.
And it amazes me that when you look at the statistical analysis and you see how we benefited by these things, that you have fixed mines, small mines, that will follow a no new taxes pledge, really mindless from a person who was born with a silver spoon, at least in his mouth, if not elsewhere. And,
Yep, no one likes to pay taxes.
But you get services for your taxes.
Yes. Just like if you make it look like you're in the business of making the United States of America and the state of Minnesota prosper in the future. If you're in a business, for instance, let's take a realtor. If you're a realtor, you want to make sure that you have more customers in the future. So maybe you don't want to pay taxes, well then just donate to a higher education system, because that'll make more customers for you. And it does pay off. It comes back in prosperity.
In a state like Minnesota, where we rely so much on the environment, we rely so much on tourism, we also have to pay attention to those things which were also suffering as a result of this mindset, this mindless mindset. We don't want people who are traveling here for vacations to be on bridges that fall in, and nobody knows that better than you. And I will not forget the day that you walked in here with a piece of the Lafayette Bridge and you put it down on the table, and
we're tearing down the Lafayette Bridge right now.
Is being torn down right now a few years later. But in the meantime, that bridge, the I-35 bridge, went down, and so many bridges are in need of repair. Even with that, you had trouble getting a full bonding bill through the legislature this year.
Yes, we did. Yes.
And that's shameful to me.
Well, and that's where there were politics involved. I was up at the Capitol when this was after the session, when Governor Dayton, it was right at the end of the session when Governor Dayton was announcing his what we call global agreement, which is what each particular area of spending was going to restrict themselves to. And out in the hallway, the Republican leadership had their response. And Kurt Doubt said, absolutely, there will not be a bonding bill this year. And he flat out told that to the media. Later on, he thankfully did decide to soften on that, because we had a lot of things that needed to be done, one of them being the Capitol building that needed to have some renovation. But
renovation. We had a state office building where pieces were falling off
Yes.
and endangering lives, that they had to build platforms to protect people walking in and out.
Yes, that was the transportation building. We had to have that. Even some places in the Capitol, we had to have some protections. And one thing you got to remember is that the Capitol building is built out of Georgia marble, which is not very. It doesn't stand up well to the more acid the rain gets, and our rain has been getting more acid. You can take a chunk of the outside of the Capitol and put it into a jar of vinegar. And I was just told this yesterday, that it will actually deteriorate into sand by the end of the day. It's
In which case, the fracking industry will come along and take it
perhaps
to a fracking location.
But that's what we needed to do. And you mentioned a new office building, and I need to go there for just a moment, because I had a person really strongly argue with me about this new Senate building that has been funded. The Capitol is going to have major restoration, major renovation. The senators that are in there today, all Democratic senators have an office in there, and some Republican senators have offices in there.
And you're all going to be moved out.
And there's going to be about perhaps 30 or less offices in there. But there's going to be a lot more hearing rooms. Has to be a lot more bathrooms, elevators, and stairways, and many other renovations that are related to the building operation. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a new building built behind the Capitol for the Senate. And the important thing is that when they start to rebuild the Capitol, the senators have to go somewhere. Just yesterday we discussed this in a caucus, that hopefully we're not going to have to exit the chambers, both the House and the Senate chambers, and find another place to meet for the 2015 session. And the issue is that we have to go somewhere. We'd have to pay for space. They were even looking downtown St. Paul for this space. And this is a big mess if you're talking about minutes between committees and about all the people that need to be in committees. And so what they decided to do was to hustle on building the building that they had been discussing for 10 years. So that building has been in discussion.
Will save money in the long run.
Yes.
And people don't understand also that the Capitol is not a new building.
No.
The Capitol was in such need of refurbishing, not just the dome, which is the least of it, other than the rain that came in, but really the building itself was archaic in some respects.
Yes.
And
yes.
You just can't operate that way. So what this expenditure is doing, like with education, it is saving money down the road.
Yes, in the long
Putting
run,
money into
save money.
education today really enhances the value of our state down the future. And I don't understand how short-sighted people cannot see that. People who take an oath to the Constitution of the state and then really just turn their back on it and listen to some mindless chatter. It's beyond me.
Well, I even wrote a note this morning to a friend. I said, I just don't understand if there is a genetic predisposition to tunnel vision or just what it is, because people are not recognizing that you need to look at many parts and alternatives to decide what the best direction is to go. You can't just make up your mind and then have what they call cognitive dissonance to any other idea. So
it's because it's become a me society. It's become a me society that really doesn't read newspapers anymore, that gets their news in sound bites, that really, really listens to people. And one of the things I described in the letter I wrote was caterwauling, but without the facts, or distorted facts, or sometimes downright lies. And you get that. And if in fact you're so involved with yourself and you're so selfish about your own personal needs, what you're doing is hurting the state, hurting the future, hurting the generations yet to come. And for instance, another thing that you did was put a freeze on tuition.
yes,
Really important that happened in this session.
we should have done that long ago. And in fact, sometimes it had been tried, but it wasn't tried at the same time as putting more money into the system to counteract that freeze. And that's what we did, is we put in, there were two amounts, and I can't recall the exact amount, but it wound up to be somewhere right around $250 million to underwrite the freeze in Minskew and at the University of Minnesota.
So much more I want to talk about, but I do want to ask you, what do you see as the big battles going into 2014?
We had a discussion yesterday about what the next steps are, and we actually were wondering, how are we going to fill out the session? We think that maybe we're going to be able to have a shorter session. The big issues that we have yet to do are figuring out what we're going to do with the minimum wage and passing that, the bullying bill, passing that. I have some personal things that I want to do about insurance fraud and some of the other fraud issues that it seems like people are bringing me a lot of those. Generally, the odd-numbered sessions are considered budget sessions, and the even-numbered are considered policy and the bonding bill session.
Can you do bonding in an odd-number year, though?
We can do it anytime we want, yes.
So you could bring back some of the things that were overlooked in this year's compromise bonding bill.
Oh, absolutely.
And try them again.
Yes. And in fact, Senator Bach said yesterday that he has had conversations with Kurt Dowd from the House and David Hand from the Senate, and they're actually open to a bonding bill that could approach $1 billion. So it's a big bonding bill. There's been about, I think it's about $2 billion worth of projects that have been presented to the governor. The governor will pick from them, and there'll be more. We expect somewhere around 3 point something to come up, and then we pick and choose the best returns.
And the fact of the matter is, as we warned a year ago, interest rates are going up.
Yes.
A year ago, they were at the lowest that they have ever been. They're not that low anymore.
Right.
A year from now, they may be even higher than they are today. That's going to cost much more money.
Yes, there was a very big missed opportunity in that dip down to the lowest interest rates and the most the hungriest contractors. It's going back up, and it's going back up very fast. Housing starts have increased tremendously. There have been a lot of both federal programs and state programs that are now, on board. We have some major construction plans in Minnesota, and one of them I need to be sure that we mention is the Mayo Clinic Destination Medical Center.
For sure.
That is...
We're actually not going to have time to talk about. I have to say, you haven't been here for quite a few months because you were so involved in the session that you couldn't get here. And I know you in particular, who work day and night at the Capitol, you're like an absentee husband.
Yes.
So that now that you're not in session as such, we got to get you back here within the next month or so.
Anytime.
To talk about some of these things, the many things that we didn't get to talk about. And don't take away my guns in the meantime.
Yes.
Among other things. Jim Carlson, Senator from the 51st, a friend, a hardworking, and a dedicated legislator. Thanks again.
Thank you, Alan.